The rise in the number of deaths in police custody, up by a third in England and Wales compared with the previous year, and the government's response today. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, has announced an independent review following a number of high-profile cases and allegations of wrongdoing. Now, the figures from the Independent Police Complaints Commission show that 17 people died in or following police custody in the year 2014 to 15, and that is up from 11 deaths in the previous year, and it is in fact the highest number recorded for 5 years. Our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly has more details.
Families of those who've died in police custody have long campaigned for better treatment for people detained, and if there is a death, more support for those left behind. In 2008, Sean Rigg, a musician who was 40, suffered a violent schizophrenic episode. He was arrested, handcuffed and forcefully restrained face down. He was confined in a police van for 11 minutes and then led into the custody area of Brixton Police Station, where he collapsed. This was caught on CCTV. He died a short time later. An inquest ruled that officers had used unsuitable force. This afternoon, the Home Secretary launched her review in Brixton.
Thankfully, deaths and serious incidents in custody are rare. No one, least of all police officers, wants such incidents to happen, and I know everyone involved takes steps to avoid them. But when such incidents do occur, every single one represents a failure and has the potential to undermine dramatically the relationship between the public and the police.
The review of deaths and serious incidents in police custody announced today will look at mental health care facilities. It will also examine the use of restraint and the current support for the families of the deceased. For Sean Rigg's sister, that last one is especially important.
The focus should be families. Families must be at the core of this review. It's very important that, so that there is confidence in families, by the families, that this is going to be really effective change.
The review will examine custody issues in England and Wales. Campaigners say previous reviews have failed to deliver.
This has got to be more than a public relations exercise. It's got to be a review that is prepared to ensure that there is effective systemic change and that we have a proper system of accountability, because ultimately a good investigation process should lead to a reduction in the number of deaths.
The families are now waiting to hear further details of the review, including who will be put in charge of chairing it. June Kelly, BBC News, Brixton.
Well, on this story, Kingsley Burrell died while in police custody in 2011, and an inquest found that prolonged restraint by the police in this case and a failure to provide basic medical attention contributed to his death. Now, his sister, Kadisha Brown Burrell, joins us now from Birmingham. Thank you so much for giving us some time this afternoon, Kadisha. What are your thoughts on this review and what it might achieve? What do you hope it can achieve?
OK, first and foremost, we welcome Theresa May's decision to actually review the review. However, when people die in police custody, families are not known what's going on. Obviously, there's a prolonged intercourse when it comes to deaths in police custody. With the IPCC, that was delayed. With Kingsley's case, that took over a year before we even knew what was going on, and hence his body wasn't released until 18 months later. After the verdict of the inquest, which we just recently received on the 15th of May, we welcome Theresa May's account for this, because this is a stepping stone in the right direction of what we've been campaigning many years for.
When you look at some of the points that are being made in the report today, we see things like inadequate risk assessments, token checks on a person in custody, insufficient handovers between custody staff, and a failure to recognise or properly deal with people with mental health concerns. Now, that's a very powerful mix of elements, but on the mental health concern, people with drug problems too, to what extent do you think the review should tackle the police's ability to spot these things?
OK, it's not only the police's ability to spot these things. When people are in a prone position for a long period of time, this is something that I would like her to address. Obviously, the length of time people are put into these prone positions are a major contributing factor towards one's death.
And in your circumstances as a family, what have you been able to gather about the circumstances of your brother's death and what's been put right in the meantime and what hasn't been put right?
Okay, in the first outset, in terms of what's been put right, is getting the damning verdict of a narrative verdict. However, that doesn't point the finger specifically on any officers. It highlights the systematic failures of all organisations that contributed to my brother's death. Hence the reason why we've asked for a public inquiry from Theresa May, which is unable to comment until we've actually had the actual inquiry for the police themselves.
You mentioned there in terms of some of the elements, but what for you remains from your brother's case that is crying out for attention that you feel the government isn't actually addressing?
Initially, when we was asking for support, like Marcia Riggs mentioned earlier, the support mechanisms for the family, because initially when someone dies, there's no support put in place for families. We don't know which way to turn, and we have to turn to inquest, for example, just for basic steps of what to expect and how long an inquest can take place and how long a family's body can actually be released in incidences which my brothers did occur.
When the review comes back and when recommendations are made, just give us a few practical things, a few practical changes that you think would make a difference in some of these very difficult cases.
Okay, what would make a difference in, for example, that would have made a big difference in our case, is even the communication techniques. Communicating with the families, letting them know what's going on, what's happening, how long the body's going to be released to the family. That's at the very basic stages, yet alone the investigation, how long the investigation is going to take place. Even that communication, that one-to-one communication with the family, so we're not left in the lurch, not knowing what's happening. Hence the reason why we had so many campaigns to do with Kingsley Burrell's case, and we marched along Birmingham just to highlight certain issues and what was happening at specific times.
There's a comment on the website I saw earlier, Khadija, which I think I'll put to you as well, from one viewer saying nobody excuses terrible mistakes made in custody. Nobody's doing that. But do you accept as well that there are huge pressures on police officers in some of these circumstances and, you know, the pressures will lead in some cases to errors being made, sometimes dreadful errors?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I do believe so. But what I like to see in the future, and what, if it's possible, she can actually put forward legislations, certain things that are put in place to say if anyone dies in police custody, you are not immune to the system. These are for organisations and police officers alike. You're not immune to the system. You can't actually go and retire. You have to be held at account to your actions at the time when it happened, because too often a lot of officers actually retire and they're not called back once they retire when a death in custody do occur.
Khadija Brown-Burrell, nice of you to come in and thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.